Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Barb Allen, otherwise known as Construction Barb, in Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you, Barb, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Absolutely. And thank you for taking the time to say the Missouri side of Kansas City. Yeah. We're very territorial here on the state line.
For anybody that doesn't know Kansas City, it's half in Kansas, half in Missouri, and I have family out that way. So be sure that you get the right state if you're ever talking to somebody from Kansas City.
And to be clear, if you're an American football fan, the Kansas City Chiefs are from Missouri. Just throwing that out there.
It's where the stadium is. All right. But jumping in, I always start out with my loaded question after, of course, some little description on Kansas City. So if you don't mind telling my listeners a little bit more about your experience so far in your education and journey.
Yeah, so my degree is in construction management. And when I was in that program, I knew that I wanted to be a job site superintendent. So that's what I did. I was the first female Dunn construction hired out of college to train to become a job site superintendent, because they were signatory or are signatory with the Carpenters Union in Kansas City. I was placed into the Carpenters Apprenticeship Program. So I literally left school in December of the 1900s and then jumped right into the field, wearing my bags and learning to use the carpentry tools to set cabinets, install countertops, concrete formwork, you name it. I did it. And then I just worked my way up in the field to foreman, assistant superintendent, and superintendent. I spent 20 years in the field and loved it. I spent most of my time as a superintendent. I built projects from Des Moines, Iowa to Houston, Texas, from $3 million to $120 million. I absolutely loved being in the field. And then after 20 years, I decided it was time for me to move into the office. So that's what I've been on, more of the office side since then.
Yeah, and I know you're doing a lot more even than the office side now as well. And so you speak a lot about your journey on the construction side, being a female in construction, and then doing, even though it's still a contractor, a big pivot from being on site to at a desk. So can you talk a little bit about those components and how that's really made you who you are today?
Yeah. So I did start my speaking business 2 years ago, but when I left the field, I did move into the office, into the pre-construction department. And I did it because I just felt like I wasn't going to get any higher in the field where I was at, and with a particular boss, not the company, but with a boss. And so I went into the office, into the pre-construction department, where if you can only imagine taking a job site superintendent that you've worked with and now putting them into an office environment where they sit behind a desk and they count things all day. Like, it did not take me long to realize I was not meant to do that job, but I wanted to do that job because it was so different than anything else I'd ever done before. Because as a superintendent, so many times we're just handed your drawings. We're handed the drawings and say, here, you're going to start this job next week or maybe even tomorrow. We don't get that whole pre-construction phase that the design team has been in for years at times. And so this allowed me to learn that part of the business. And I did it for about a year. But man, I will tell you, it was a big learning curve. For starters, let's just talk about language. The language that tends to be used in the field versus the language that is more acceptable in an office environment. That was a bit of a struggle for me to readapt. You know, when I left college, I was not a 4-letter word user. That's part of what came in my career in the field. But then I moved into the office and learned to speak differently. I also was now surrounded by women. I was used to being the only woman in the field. And now I was surrounded by women. That was new for me. And yeah, I had to get a whole new wardrobe. Like that was shoes in general. Like I've worn the same kind of boots forever, and I had to get actual shoes. So there were a lot of transitions there, but I did that. I did that for a year, and then I got a call from a recruiter to go the owner side of the business. So I really got to learn the other side, the whole design and that collaboration part, and truly work with the architects and engineers. Coming from a superintendent background, that was such a cool experience to go through. And we built really cool stuff across the nation. I absolutely loved it. I did that for about 4 years before going back to the general contractor side where I was an operations director. So it was all a very big, I mean, I have had a lot of learning experience in the industry, but yeah, in 2022, I said, enough. It is time for me to see what I can do to go out and make a difference for women in this industry.
Yeah, and just how that can help so much. Because I know I leverage my superintendents on a job site just to learn. And it's, hey, if this detail is not working, how would you do it? How are you seeing it differently through your eyes? Because a lot of the times architects are learning through 2D details. And it's not till you're on the job site and see things in 3D and see what you're looking at. And that's what you do all the time as a super. So I always like building those relationships. I know I always try to educate that to the architects that want to like have an arm against the general contractor. I'm like, no, you got to leverage them and use it as a learning opportunity. So
absolutely. Those kind of architects are a dream for the general contractor, for the superintendent. And, you know, I worked with a lot of great architects, but the best architect I ever really worked with was one who came to me and said, this is what I want it to look like. I don't know how to get it there. Because, you know, I would call her and say, I don't, this doesn't work like this. Can I do this? And she's like, no, that won't get me what I'm looking for. And okay, help me understand what you're looking for. And together we came up with some really cool designs that would not have happened. I mean, how many times as an architect have you gone out to the field and been disappointed because the general contractor was like, well, it didn't work, so I had to do this. And they didn't have your vision. They didn't know what your vision was. They just thought it was this. And so they did something different.
yeah, a lot like you said, the super is not in those design meetings that are sometimes over a year long on just learning what the client wants, what their preferences are, and the reasoning behind certain decisions. And so you're equally catching up that it's okay, if I didn't communicate that through drawing properly, then let's have a discussion and problem solve together.
Yes, absolutely. It's such an important relationship. I love that you're using the leverage part of it and you're teaching other people to use that. It's a huge important relationship, and too often it is more of an arm wrestle.
Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't need to be. I've done the
It
arm
doesn't.
wrestling before, and it just makes for a painful experience.
Painful, yes.
And tangenting into the women's side, because that was one of my worst experiences the first time being on a job site and realizing I'm the only woman. And so I have been there. And while I was starting out, I was hoping my hair would turn gray earlier so I could gain some more respect, because being a young female starting out and being on a job site on a regular basis, there's a lot of bias along the way, even on the design team side and talking to contractors, the trades, and that's all grown too. But how was your experience starting out?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of bias. Some of it is conscious. I think a lot of it is unconscious bias. But very similar, except I never wanted my hair to turn gray. To this day, Caitlin, I'm dying. So it is not gray, but similar to you, I looked forward to when I turned 30. I was like, oh, now I get to say I'm 30. Oh, now I get to say I'm 35. Oh, now I get to say I'm 40. Where other women and friends of mine were like, I don't want to turn 35. You don't want to turn 40. And I'm like, oh no, this gives me clout. It gives me what I need to say,
Yep.
dude, I'm 40 years old. I've been doing this for a while, right? So I absolutely get that. But there's a lot of challenges. And even for anyone coming out of college, there is a bias against you, especially from the field personnel. One, you're the college kid. And
Mm-hmm.
two, you just look young and you don't have the experience that they have. Throw in there being a female, being someone that looks something different than what they're used to working with. It's literally like when I started, it was kind of like I think they thought I was an alien or something. Like they were just watching, like, what is she going to do? What do you think she's going to do now? And they would throw tests at me, like, go do this or go do
Mm-hmm.
this, see what I do, see how I would react when they'd say something appalling. It was like let's just see what happens here. You just push through. I just push through. I don't know that that's the advice I'd give to people today, but granted, it was 1996 when I graduated college. So I put up with a lot more than I would tell anyone to put up with today.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice, because even I don't know, even when I hit walls now, sometimes it's, you get pushback on that's not how it was when I started, and that's not how this was done then. And it's, well, times change, generations change, and what people put up with changes. And if you want to grow women in the trades, because we're going to hit a labor shortage, we're not going to put up with the crap that happened in the 80s and 90s. And even educating males or females, we learn differently that tough love isn't working on the latest generation. So no matter what the gender is, you have to change your mindset along the way and grow.
Absolutely. That's a point that I drive home in one of my keynotes where I talk about the gender specific challenges that women have getting into the industry. And one of those is about the old traditions and how we do things the old way and we think things the old way. And my whole point on this is it comes to the way that they look at women or they think about women sometimes is, oh, a woman's going to want to get off early, or she's going to want to leave early, or she's going to want to come in late because she has kids, or she's got something to take care of with the family, or she's not going to understand how we talk on a job site, or all these things about a woman's not. And my point in that keynote is it's not about women. It's totally about this younger generation. We have 41% of our labor force retiring in 7 years. That means the younger generations have to come in to fill those spots. And the younger generations, no matter their gender, these generations want to be home with their kids. They want a better work-life balance. They're not going to put up with the same BS that we did when we were coming up in the field. And, you think about the construction, last I knew, was second in the industries, in all industries, for suicide rates, because we have this machismo culture in the field, and that has to change. And whether we say we'll never have another woman in construction ever, it still has to change or we won't fill these spots. We have to change for the younger generation to come in. It has nothing to do with women. It's just finally the whole younger generation is thinking more the way that we have been thinking for years.
And actually making a change to it.
Yes.
And I've seen plenty of job sites where the project engineers rotate on what weekends they cover the site and they rotate with the supers. That's a fantastic strategy not to burn anybody out, and it's scheduled. I think that's the biggest part. If you got to expand outside that normal range, it's let's have this be scheduled and planned so then everybody else can plan around it, regardless if you're playing a sport in the evening, have to pick up a child from daycare, or taking care of a parent. You never know what part of people's lives are going on. So
that's right. Well, and two things for me, when I was a superintendent, I always had a schedule for everyone had one weekend a month or one weekend every 5 weeks. That was just their weekend. So if we ended up not working at all, they got lucky. If we ended up working all through the weekend, they kind of got screwed. But that way you knew ahead of time, this was your weekend and you had to block it off. But the biggest win I ever had in the field from a superintendent and hours standpoint was the last job that I was a superintendent on. We had hired the project management team had contracted a framer. It was the only wood frame job I ever did, but they'd hired a framer out of St. Louis, and we were in Kansas City for this job. And the framer wanted to work 410s. And so the project management staff came to me and said, hey, by the way, this contractor works 410s. And I said, okay, great. Who's going to stay? And they just, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I work 4/8. So are you guys staying to cover the other 2 hours? Well, no, but this is what their contract said. Well, if you expected me to do it, you probably should have talked to me about it. And the next thing I know, an executive's calling me. I understand there's a problem. There is a problem, but not if you find someone to cover it. And finally, they went back to the contractor and said, we're working 5/8. But I had to push back. I had to stand up for myself. I had to stand up for my team because that's just not fair. People are making contracts for people that aren't themselves, for other people having to work those hours. And I think that's so important for people to not accept the norm, challenge the norm, and make a change in the industry.
Yeah, I always felt bad if I had to stay on site later. My last job that I did CA for, I had to travel for. And so when I'm up there, it is a long, 12-hour day for me. I may not be on the site for a solid 12 hours, but my lunch breaks are cut short. They're quick. And then I tend to stay late. And I always felt bad. I'm like, somebody had to pick the short straw and stay late because I was still on the job site. But it's when you can't get to a job site, just driving down the street, it's nope, I'm going to be here and I'm going to hit everything. I'm not ending my day till I have checked off all the boxes I need to hit. And I always felt bad for whoever got stuck staying.
As long as you're giving that notification to the field staff in plenty of time where they can plan, the worst thing is nobody wants to stay late at the last minute. You know, when we have a concrete pour, we know we're probably going to stay late. Something's probably going to go wrong. But when all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you're going to need to stay until 9 tonight. You're like,
didn't plan.
It's not fair to anyone, right?
Exactly. Because then if you're going to stay late, okay, then you can pack a lunch and a dinner and you don't go hangry at the end of the day or anything.
Yes.
So,
and you also have a plan. Okay, hey, wait, I know I got to stay 4 extra hours, 2 extra hours, whatever. I can get this done tonight. So today I can go do this during the day. You can make a plan for it. Otherwise, somebody tells me I got to stay at the last minute. I just kind of sit around pissed off. So
I always say that coming in on a Monday morning and I get a pile of RFIs and submittals, I'm like, oh no, somebody was actually productive working the weekend. But I'm kind of sticking a little bit longer with your early part of the career. Was there any challenge that you faced that was almost a point of quitting? Because things can get kind of challenging. I know you said you fought through different challenges, but was
Yeah.
there anything that was particularly?
Well, for me it was I don't remember ever hitting anything that made me feel like I'm done. I am leaving this job. Um Now that I say that, I'm thinking about a time that I actually did leave. Okay, I'll give you this one. So, yeah, I had an owner that I was a superintendent. This was in Houston. I had an owner's rep who was awful. I mean, awful. And I was standing up for myself, and I had a boss who wasn't. He was more of the, hey, this is what the owner wants. This is what we do. He was kind of old school, right? Like, where no, he needs us to work 12 hours a day. No, that's not our contract. That's not what we're doing. And I had finally had enough. And I called in one morning and I said, hey, I'm not coming in today. And my boss said, okay, you're not telling me anymore. And I said, I also don't know if I'm coming in tomorrow or if I'm coming back at all. I said, I need some time to process everything that's going on and see if there's a path forward, because I'm not going to continue doing this. And I literally put in my headphones and took my dog and walked for hours that day, just thinking and thinking and thinking. And my boss kept texting me, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? And finally, the next day, I called him and said, we need to have a chat. I'll tell you what needs to go on. But ultimately, I didn't feel supported. I needed someone above me to feel like they had my back. And at that time, I did not feel that. And the funny thing is that I went in, and when he and I had this conversation, it was actually in person. And I gave him 2 weeks to give him 2 weeks. I said, I'm going to give you 2 weeks. If this isn't fixed in 2 weeks, I'm going to actually give you my 2 weeks to quit. So that was what I did. And within a few days, things had changed, but I just had taken all that I could take. And there is something different when you look like someone like me on site. It's so easy for someone to think you can be a pushover. And if someone above you doesn't also stand up for you, you get labeled. You, the female, gets labeled as the difficult one because the boss keeps rolling over. And I just wasn't going to do it anymore.
Yeah, but I think that's good advice that you just took a break, stepped away, but then advocated for yourself at the same time. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people would just put their heads down and taken it, or just quit and wait till it's fiery.
Yeah, and I think too many people, especially in our industry, it may be more male than female, but I think they get all upset and they get on fire and they quit. And I don't think you have to make sure you've really given someone a chance to fix what's going wrong. And I think communication is not one of the things that we do best in this industry. And if you haven't really told someone what they need to fix, you're just expecting them to know, or you're expecting them to know you wanted a promotion, or expecting them to know you wanted a raise, and you don't get it and you quit. Like, that's not fair. You need to make sure that your intentions or your needs are known, give them a chance to fix it. And if they don't, you don't ever have to look back and think, I wish I could have done more, because you did. You laid it all on the line and they didn't step up.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into the next question I was going to ask, because I know you spent a good chunk of time at the same company and did a lot of career growth within that company.
Mhm.
So, what advice do you have for climbing that ladder internally? Because I know nowadays everybody's telling the young professionals, okay, well, you've got to jump around to different companies if you want to grow, and you may not need to do that.
Yeah, I don't think you need to do that. I think there can be advantages, but there's advantages and disadvantages to both. For me in my career, the first two bosses that I worked for they were really good at promoting when you were doing a good job. So I got promoted very quickly. So 6 years out of college, I was running my first job as the superintendent. But then it stopped. I didn't get another promotion in the field for an unacceptable number of years. And so much of that is because, and granted, my yearly performance reviews said I was excellent. So it's not like I was getting bad reviews and not moving up, but I was getting great reviews and not moving up. And what I had to finally realize is that I wasn't advocating for myself. I wasn't saying, hey, I'm looking for this next position. What is it going to take for me to get there? I think a lot of people go at it as, hey, I don't know why I didn't get this. Well, first you got to tell them you want it and then figure out what it's going to take to get you there. And then I hear a lot of people say, well, they should know that I want the next promotion. You're probably right, but they don't. And once I got to the operations director position, I realized as an operations director, the people who are truly giving the promotions, you are so busy and you are juggling so many things that sometimes you forget, oh yeah, this person maybe's only been with us a couple of years, but they've been in the industry for 9 years, right? Like they have all this experience. We need to be looking at them for a promotion as well. It's those people who keep coming to you saying, hey, I want my next promotion. What do I have to do to get there? As an operations director, they were a little annoying. I had 2 of them in particular, love them to death now, but they were just constant. They wanted to meet almost every month, and that was a little much. So we met quarterly. All right, let's look at this. Where have you come on the spectrum to get to the next step? Now, what do you need to do more? You've got to let people know what you want. And if you do so and they can't tell you what you need to be doing differently, that's probably when it's time to change companies. I think there are a lot of old school companies out there that don't really have an outline of the leadership ladder. And they're like, yeah, you'll get there. Don't worry, you'll get there. I'm sorry, no. Like, help me understand what the actual path is to get there, or help them create a path for you. That would be my biggest advice for career advancement in a company. There's no need to jump around unless you've given them that opportunity and they're not helping you understand what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, because if there's no ladder path, it's kind of hard to know where to step next.
Yes.
And then it's just like, okay, I'm not going to wait till I stumble upon a diamond that opens up a door for me. Yeah, you got to figure it out.
You do.
So then on the office side, what was it like transitioning over there? I know you gave one story on, 2 people that were a little bit more annoying on that side to hear, but how was the rest of the office operations and adjusting to new outfit, females, and the business side?
It was, when I first moved in from the field to the office, no one in our company had ever gone from superintendent to pre-construction. So it was all kind of what is she doing? Did she get demoted? Why is she here? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bit
I understand it as 2 separate paths, typically.
Yes. Typically it's 2 completely different paths. It's not somewhere someone would go after 20 years in the field into pre-construction. But it was also a little frustrating that they didn't realize like what I could actually bring to that department. They had a hard time thinking outside of the box about what a superintendent could offer an estimating pre-construction department. But what was really cool is I got to see things that I didn't know were available to us. For example, the company used on-screen takeoff for all the estimates. And as I was taught to use it, I'm looking at this thinking, oh my God, if I had had this as a superintendent, how many times I counted windows page by page with a pencil and a highlighter, right? How many times I took my scale and measured off the fencing that I was going to need for the job. Like how much time these tools that are used inside could have saved those of us who worked outside. So there was a lot of that, but by the time I got to the operations director position, I had both sides. So I could see it both ways and I could help prep people and share information in a way that was advantageous for the company as a whole, helping people understand this is where the superintendent's coming from on this, or this is where the project manager is coming from, or even better, this is where the owner is coming from. And that was probably one of the biggest lessons was we, as architects or as field people, we get really frustrated when owners keep changing their minds. We already finished the drawings, or we're almost ready to stand this wall, right? And then the architect, or we sometimes we think the architect's just changing
you
it.
hear from
usually,
us.
yes, we're like, this darn architect, but it's usually the owner wanting a change. And for me, I had spent most of my career building projects with public money, hospitals and schools. So when I went to the owner's side that was private money, all of a sudden I got a whole new take of, oh, this is why they want to change their mind at the end. And then helping people understand why that matters, right? Like for me, I was building 30-story luxury apartment towers. And those have a 2 to 3 year pre-construction life. And then they have another 2 years for construction. So that is a 5-year cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we chose finishes, even after 2 years of pre-con, those finishes are almost outdated by the time we finish the building and people start moving in. So they're understanding how those changes happen and helping the contractor set deadlines to say, okay, here's when it really can't change or it will affect the schedule. I think that was my biggest lesson moving around in the industry, was really starting to understand where the different partners are coming from.
Yeah. Or even I've hit when you're updating a whole skyscraper and you have different phases throughout, by the time you get to phase 3 or 4, the same finishes may not be available that were in phase 1. You may be working more efficient by the time you hit 3 and 4, but then you're still going to have submittals because things get discontinued. Then you have to do the whole process with the owner again. And who knows if those prices are going to align, if they've got the funds.
Yes.
But how is the transition in like getting a drawing from us, who's had years of talking to the owner, to the pre-con, who, depending on when the pre-con gets pulled on board, whether it be during the design process, and then what do you get just handed? Is there any like discussion or presentation from the pre-con group to handle that information pass over, or is it here's the drawings, you figure it out?
It totally depends on the company, and sometimes it totally depends on the people running the handoff. I mean, there were times, so many times in my career, where I was just handed a roll of drawings and I would just sit down and start diving in, and no one ever did a handoff to me. And there's so much information lost in that. But when I was an operations director, that is something that I made sure I put in place, was a real turnover. I wanted to make sure, by the time I was operations director, I had been the owner's rep and 20 years in the field. So this was kind of the culmination of making sure it's going to be right, and created an entire plan of this is how a turnover needs to actually go, and here's who's responsible for what part and piece of it. That's too many companies. I mean, even subcontractors, they struggle to do it. And it needs to happen at all levels, not just the general contractor level.
Yeah, because I've definitely, my last project that I ran all the way through construction, I definitely saw glimpses of, I wish the design team would do a design presentation to everybody bidding the job. Because a lot of the times, yeah, you do a walkthrough, but people either do or don't want to ask questions because they're trying to win the job. But sitting through a pre-bid meeting, and a mechanical sub wanted to redesign all the mechanical system because they were like, I don't know why the engineer's making this so complicated. And I'm like, wait, these are high STC rated walls. Like, we're only breaking one wall and let the other 3 be true. And once I explain the design intent with it, because we don't really put the design intent in that way in drawings, they were like, oh, I get it. And I'm like, if we got bids back that were redesigning a bunch of stuff that was never going to work, then you're wasting time in shop drawings because we wouldn't have seen it until then. Or I had a floor that we designed it through light because it was pediatrics, but they didn't want it to feel kiddie. And it wasn't until the lights turned on, and that's not till very late in the project because the space looks very just stark and white whenever you're constructing it. And even our electrical engineers were there and we were fixing the lighting and toning, and he had an aha moment. He's like, I get it now. And I understand, but it was a year into the project before he understood. I'm like, I wish I would have given you a design presentation and gone through rendering so you could understand what you were building to help you through some of the quality questions that they had along the way, that they probably would have had more understanding of the intent. So I've seen it from all directions that I'm like, we could do all these presentations to the owner. What's not taking the latest one and presenting it to everybody beyond just the CDs?
That's a great idea. I'm also a big proponent of design assist. I love when we can get the MEP subs in early, because just like you said, they need to understand your actual intent. But as architects and engineers, pricing isn't your thing. Sorry, but no matter how good architects and engineers think they're giving a budget to an owner, I have yet to see one that I was like, oh yeah, this is probably right. Sorry, that's not your lane, right? Nope. Like, you're really good at designing. Let the people price who price. But if you can bring those subs in early enough to say, hey, here's what I'm wanting to do. What do you think would be the most cost-effective option? And are they looking for it on the front end, or are they looking for that cost effectiveness on the back end? So everyone's got to be in that conversation. But man, it changes so much about how the construction of the project goes. And it starts the collaboration early instead of forcing collaboration once the drawings are done and the subs have won the job with the way they put the bed together.
Yeah, because then everything gets more pricey then. Every little change and adjustment, if you can make it during the design, it's a lot simpler. Or making sure we've checked all the boxes so when they're bidding it, it actually makes sense.
Yes.
Because I've got an electrical manufacturer that sits across the hall from me. So I see a great number of drawings come in from architects and engineers that he loves telling me when stuff is not communicated properly or the information's not there, and they just have to take a shot at the dark on trying to bid it. And it's like, oh, well, I wish they brought somebody on early to make sure they crossed all their T's and dotted their I's before it got to you. Type scenario. So, but I wanted to shift a little bit off construction site and shift over to what you're doing now, because now you've pivoted more into a career in educating and advocating for women in construction. So what inspired you to make that pivot?
Yeah, conversations. The last company I worked for, I just found myself having so many conversations that were rooted in unconscious bias. And I realized I've been having these same conversations for 25 years. Why had nothing changed? I had found a way to become successful. I had made it to the top, and I had thought it was going to get easier. Like, I thought, you just push through all this and you get to the top and you'll be fine. And when I got to the top, I found it was actually harder. And there was one day in particular, I got called into a conference room where the vice president and the HR director were sitting. And that's never a good moment, right? And they said, so there have been some complaints that you're difficult to work with and you're difficult to work for, and we'd like to get you a coach. And I said, okay, great. I love a coach, but I'm going to need to know what difficult means, right? Like, I can't just go to a coach and say, hey, can you make me more difficult? She's going to say, in what way? And their response to my question was, well, no one could actually articulate it. It's just kind of a feeling. And I said, okay, let me explain to you that I have been dealing with this my entire career. I am 5'5". I weigh 125 pounds. I am not the person anyone expects to talk to them the same way that my 6'4" white male partner talks to them. And so when he says what he says, he's effective. When I say what I say, I'm difficult. And all of a sudden the HR manager says, this is beginning to sound a lot like unconscious bias. And I'm like, and the vice president said, what's that? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, this guy's basically my age. How does he not? He's never even heard of it. He doesn't know what unconscious bias is. This is why the industry isn't changing. This is why things aren't getting better, because we're not educating on these challenges and what unconscious bias is. Now, granted, 25 years ago, we didn't call it unconscious bias. We just called it crap, right?
Yeah.
But that's when I decided, like, I left that meeting and I did a lot of thinking. And several months later, I said, hey, I'm giving my notice. I'm going to go out and start a business that tries to make a difference for women in this industry. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, because a lot of companies don't, at least on the architecture side, there are a lot of small businesses, so they don't even have HR a lot of the times internally. Yeah. And so sometimes they'll hire people outside, but it's not till if you have an opportunity at a large firm that actually has HR and actually has a training protocol that you get taught this. Or even learning the issues I had in the field. I guess the issues I had in general early in my career were less within the design office. Still had some unconscious bias there, but it was a lot of stuff in the field. And I'm like, well, that's not my company. It's a tradesperson that I'm struggling with, or a project manager on the construction side, and it's removed from my company. Mm-hmm. And realizing, oh, you could actually say something about it. And it wasn't until much later that somebody thought it was a current project I was on. I was like, no, that was years ago. Where were you? I asked for help. I asked for a male counterpart to come with me so you could see it yourself. And seeing how it's just unconscious for people, they don't think of it. It's a lot like being a female and walking through a city sometimes. Even if I have headphones on, I highly doubt I'm actually listening to music. And teaching that to my now husband. It's like, no, this is how I function and operate. I can't wear heels when I leave an office late at night, or else who knows what's going to happen, and different cat calls. And I've had cat calls on site and other little conversations thinking I'm somebody else and not the architect that you got to listen to. So you never know what you're going to hit.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I have found, and I found this through a conversation with my ex, actually, that the men who see us as equals, unfortunately, are some of our biggest problem. And if you're listening to this right now, don't stop listening. Let me ring you in here. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's so, like, my ex, for example, he was raised by a very strong mom and with two very strong sisters. To him, he's gender blind, and gender blind hurts us because that person doesn't see for himself. That means he doesn't see when it's happening to us. And it was a conversation, like the very first speech I gave was 8 years ago now. And it was practicing on the couch the night before and just going through some things with him. And he's like, you are such a feminist. And I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I am not sure the tone that you said it with. I'm going to process this. And we talked about a few things. And then as a few months went on, and granted, he's in construction as well, he started to pay more attention on his own job sites. And he would call me or text me, or when he got home, he'd say, okay, this happened on the job to so-and-so. How do I help her? Like, what do I do? Like, this is what I want. And I'm like, he needed that awakening to start paying attention to it. And that's my ask of any man listening to this podcast right now. If you are quote unquote gender blind, if you believe women are equal, I just ask you to start paying attention to how other people treat us so that you can actually see that and help make that change for us, because that's, man, it's so rewarding when I have a guy come to me and say, hey, this happened. What do I do? Somebody that's in the past said, I don't know why we're still talking about women, right? Like, aren't they equal? Like, I don't know what the problem is. Why do we still have this conversation? And then they start seeing it. That's how we're going to make real change.
Yeah. And just keeping an eye out for it rather than ignoring or pretending it doesn't exist is important.
Yeah, and I don't even think that a lot of them ignore or pretend. I think they just are blind to it. They're not intentionally looking for it. And I think, are there some women out there who are intentionally looking for how they're getting set back? Absolutely. Sure there are. But most of us, we're not looking for that. Like, I overlook so much. I mean, my ex-husband would say to me, like, I don't, you know what that means. You know what they're saying. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that being a downplay to me. You know, it's like, I'm not seeing it. And then once you start seeing it, you want to do something about it.
Yeah. And it just becomes way more apparent
It
when you
does.
see it all the time.
It does.
And I know I listened to one of your keynote speeches on talking about different ladder rungs and how there are ladders for both women and men, and the women's ladder is a little bit different. So can you speak a little bit about that, Tom?
Yeah. So I call it one ladder, and I do it 3 different versions of it, but one ladder to leadership. I talk about how on paper, men and women are climbing the same ladder to leadership. But the reality is it's more like a double wide job built ladder, where the side that women are climbing has broken, missing, sticky, and slippery rungs that are slowing our climb or keeping some women from climbing altogether. And I go into each of those rungs is, for example, the missing rungs. The missing rungs are related to missing information. This is information that's not making it down the ladder to a woman that would help improve her performance, or information that's not making it up the ladder about a woman so that people know what she has accomplished and what she's ready to do next. And on that rung, the missing rung, the information that's not making it up the ladder, mostly that's on us. As women, we are typically not as good at self-promotion. We're not typically as good at saying, hey, I want this next promotion. Hey, I want this next raise. Hey, I just totally kicked ass on this project. Or, hey, I just got a $33,000 change order for this. You know, we're not as good as that at that typically as our male colleagues, and it holds us back. But the information that's not making it down to us, that's the one that I'm really the most passionate about, because I don't think people realize it's happening. And it's those conversations that happen in closed door meetings where managers are talking about the shortcomings of their employees and why they will or will not get that next promotion. And too many times, when managers leave those meetings, they may go to one of their male subordinates and say, hey, man, this came up in the conversation. You need to do better at this. And unfortunately, too often they don't go have the conversation with the woman. And I think it's because they don't want to hurt her feelings, or they're afraid that she's going to get defensive, or maybe she'll even cry. I think there's good intention between that they're not being as direct with female employees as they are with their male employees, but it's holding us back. Like, we need to know this is a problem. You need to fix it. And there's a lawyer who heard this speech, and he emailed me a few months later, and he said, you know, I saw it in action. He said, I actually was in a meeting where they were talking about a young female associate and why she wouldn't move up the ladder. And it was because she just wasn't getting involved. And he said, prior to hearing you talk about it, I would have just assumed that somebody had already gone to her and said, you need to get involved to move up. And she was choosing not to because she has small kids or whatever the reason, right? Mm-hmm. He said, but I decided to go to her and ask her. And I said, has anybody told you this is holding you back? And by the end of the same day, she joined 2 committees. Like, it's just, not getting to women as quickly because men tend to be more direct with their male subordinates, and that's a problem. We have to figure out how to fix that. So that's the missing rung is the one that I'm just the most passionate about, but just a quick run through on the others, unless you have a story you want to tell about the missing rung.
No, but I love that it's both directions because I agree. Like, yes, there's information missing coming down the ladder, but it's also on us to advocate for ourselves
Yep,
to identify that that rung is missing. And so I love that
absolutely.
it's that one's such a two-way street, even though it is a little bit more education on pulling people down the ladder to see that that rung's even missing. But there's stuff we can do on the other side too to help with it.
Absolutely. It works both directions, and we need it from both sides for us to actually move up.
Exactly.
So the next rung is the broken rung. And this is where I really talk about the old, the tired, the worn out, the because we've always done it this way rungs. And what I really focus on here is networking. You think about all the ways, and from an architectural standpoint, this may be different. So I'd love to hear your take on it. But from a construction standpoint, too often the networking activities, the social activities where we're going to take a subcontractor to do this or do that are built around predominantly male activities, whether it's golf or hunting or fishing or a clay shooting afternoon. And so many women aren't interested in these. And when we choose not to attend, we miss out on those organic relationships. And that's where that organic mentorship and sponsorship relationships actually form, is in those out of office situations. So part of it is on us to step outside our comfort zone and try and do some, like, I'm never going to go hunting. I don't want to kill anything. I'm not opposed to other people doing so if they're going to eat it, but I could never do that. I would cry my eyes out. But I did learn to golf. I'm not good at it, but I learned how to do it because I thought it'd be important for my career. But the other part of it is the industry has to look back and say, what can we do to get a more diverse group of our people to these networking events? And I think too often they tend to separate and say, oh, well, women don't want to do that, so we're going to have a spa day or we're going to have a wine night or
Hmm.
something. And it's not the same, because most of the top leaders in our companies are still male, and they're not coming to the spa day or they're not coming to the wine night. So we're still not getting that same organic relationship connection that we're looking for. Have
Yeah.
you experienced that?
Yes, and in kind of different directions.
Okay.
So I've had the assumption that I don't golf, and I actually love golfing. And so I enjoy golfing. I've had the longest drive at a
Nice.
company like Scramble. I've saved people's butts because I'm shooting from the women's tees.
Right?
So why not ask? And people don't even ask, they assume. They assume because I'm a female that I don't golf. And they only ask my male counterparts to go to a golf event. And I have to really advocate for myself to go. And I have to over communicate when I golf and go out and hit a bunch of birdies or hit my best, like, golf score. Like, I've hit in the 90s. Like, I do fine. I used to call it croqueting up the fairway and just trying to barely make it there. And I'm like, no, I have good drives now. I take, like, I go practice and make sure it's fine. But, like, going to, like, a top golf event is completely different. You don't have to be good at golf because it's not like that scarcity of you're not hitting the ball and getting up there. And I definitely had to practice, so I had the confidence whenever I go to an outing. But I also
Yeah.
know I have to, like, have a beer to start out the outing to, like, calm my nerves, then I'm fine. But you can do top golf and invite women too, because it's a lot less stressful because you're just hitting a ball and nobody's actually paying attention to what's going on in that sense. I
Or
haven't
they
done
can
it.
choose not to hit. The women can choose not
Yeah,
to hit and just hang out and have appetizers or a drink or whatever. It's an opportunity for people to choose what they want to do at the
exactly.
activity.
And even the other ones, I think it's just having that safety to learn. So when I started golfing, all the women in the office like went to a driving range to help learn to build that confidence to know what they're getting into. Because for the ones that don't know how to golf, but we want to be part of it, it's just how do I start learning or how do I do lessons? Like I haven't done a clay shoot, but I would definitely want to go clay shooting on my own prior to going because I know there's recoil with the gun. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be scared, shocked whenever that happens, but I'll do embarrassing things in front of my husband or my brother-in-laws. And so I'll do that, but let me do that first. So if there's an event, don't tell me, hey, it's tomorrow. Hey, say, hey, there's an event coming up this month to like buy me some time to do that. So I think I've had it from the other way that I'm more open. I won't go shoot an animal. That I'll just say no to, but I think it's just assuming that I don't do things because of my gender, which makes it hard. So I almost have to over explain and over talk about sports with guys. It's like, hey, let's go to a football game. I know what's going on. Hey, invite me to a Super Bowl squares poll, or let me be part of the fantasy group. I've done fantasy football. Don't assume I won't be a part of it. Yeah. And I get upset by the numbers when my teams don't do well. Like I pay attention. It's like ask, and
I've got a team I can recommend for you.
As much as I get frustrated, we'll see how you guys end up. You may end up as bad as New England was for a while.
Knock on wood.
But it makes it more fun.
What's interesting to me is you also touched on something about how we as women, we feel like we have to be good at something or know something before we step into it. And men are like, oh, I've never done that. Let's do it. Right? Mm-hmm. Like that is something that is a definite divider for us as well, whether it's job descriptions and applying for a job where a man will apply if he fits 30% of the qualifications and a woman feels she has to fit more than 70%. Like these are all things that we do. And you're exactly right. Like we want to feel like we're more comfortable before we step in and make an ass of ourselves. And men are more comfortable just making an ass of themselves. So, I mean, good for them. I wish I was a little more comfortable like that. And, I will say, anytime I say men and women, I'm always talking in generalities, and it's based on statistics and information. I don't in any way believe all men or all women act in any one particular way. I have met too many people to know that.
Well, I've learned where my hesitations are, and I use my male colleagues, friends, husband to challenge myself to give me that confidence. So it's, hey, I'm hitting this, and I know I shouldn't feel that way. Like I know when I look at a resume, if I hit 50-60% of the checklist, great, because there's always room for growth. But sometimes if I don't feel that confidence when applying or putting together everything, I'll go talk to one of them, because sometimes I know for me, I just need that little extra boost in understanding where my capabilities are outside my own head. But I trick myself that way. It's, hey, I'm hitting a wall. I'm going to go talk to somebody. And then I realize, oh, the wall doesn't exist. I just do it anyway.
Yep.
And then we'll see what happens.
Well, and I'll tell you a story that is really impactful and hopefully for your audience as well. When I, after being somewhere 20 years, when I applied for, or when the recruiter reached out, right? And they always go through this whole thing, and then they're like, well, what is your salary? What do you want to make? And I reached out to a male friend of mine, a colleague that I had worked together with for many years, for several years, I guess, in Houston, someone I totally trusted, and said, help me understand, what should this position be making? And when he told me the number, I'm like, what? Like, I didn't think anybody'd pay me that much. He's like, that is what it makes. That is the position. That is what you ask for. And I'm like, okay. He was just so matter of fact about it. So when they asked me the question, like, has anybody talked salary to you yet? Are you ready to talk salary? I said, yeah, absolutely. I would need to make X in order to make the move. And just said it very confidently because it was delivered so confidently to me, and I got it. And each time I continue to call on that one person and say, here's what I'm thinking. And from the time that I left that company until the time that I started my speaking business, I increased my salary by $80,000 in 6 years.
That
So
is awesome.
that is all about having people that advocate and stand up for you and say, this is what you should be making in this role. It's not just guessing. It's not thinking I'm worth this. It is doing your research to figure out what is it worth.
Yeah. And I remember I did a short stint on the contracting side and ended up not being the right company fit for me. I
Uh-huh.
probably would have been fine, but like the number they put at me, because design teams just don't make that amount, it was a
Yeah.
50% pay raise. And I was like, well, sure. Like, let's go try it out and see what happens. And that boost helped me in other ways as I shifted on and it didn't work out.
That's
But
right.
sometimes when you get that number, like you need to have a poker face on and not have like deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh. But understanding where that is in the number. And when I went back to the design side, I knew I was going to take a drop, but I advocated for a lot lower of a drop, that it still would have been a crazy raise from that prior design firm.
Yeah.
But once you know the numbers, it's a little bit easier to advocate for it because you know where you should be. And if somebody wants to
That's right.
lowball you, it's not worth your time.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I wanted to jump into another part of your business with the 49 percenters box that you have going.
14.
14ers, sorry.
14 percenters. No, you went back into football. I
Yeah, I
see where you
know.
got that. Uh-huh.
It's the gold and yellow because then see, for all the football fans, and you got the little gold and yellow, or gold and red for the 49ers in San Francisco. So proof that I
That's
know my
right.
football teams.
That's right.
But what is going on with the box that you send out? How often? What's in it? I want to know everything.
Yeah. So the 14 percenters is a quarterly subscription box that is curated specifically for women in construction, whether they're office roles, field roles, you name it. It is the box that is meant to make you feel like, oh, wait, I do belong here. Because how many times are you handed, so somebody walks in to give you swag and they give you that ball cap that we're never going to wear as a woman, or they give you the shirt that the smallest size they had on is a nightshirt size for you. It's just like we're an afterthought, whether it's with PPE that's too big for us or swag that just isn't our style or our fit or whatever. We always feel like an afterthought. And I wanted to create something that made women feel like, wait, I do belong here. And so that's what this box is all about. It is every box includes something from construction that we always get in the guy's fit, size, or style, and it's in our size. So the first ever box was shipped out in October. It sold out in 72 hours. But the first box had a pair of safety glasses in it that are by their, what are they called? Pyramex minis. I think that's what they're called. And they are the first time I ever put them on my face, I was like, oh my gosh, these actually fit my face. And the glasses are very inexpensive, but the feeling they gave me to actually fit my face, I'm like, these are going in the first box. So every box has something like that. Every box has a growth component to it. So the first box had a book called When Women Lead, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a book that helps women understand ways to articulate the ways that women can truly dynamically change a business from leadership roles. So that was in the first box, as well as something that is just makes you feel empowered, something that makes you feel feminine as well, because I spent so many years in my career trying to separate my femininity from construction. Like I I didn't want to seem girly at all. You keep that color pink away from me. Like I wanted no association with being female. I wanted to be one of the guys so bad. And I remember I was the first female that was ever placed into the Construction Superintendent magazine as their feature superintendent. And I debated for hours over what I was going to wear in that picture. I don't think any guy superintendent would have debated for a second. Probably on his way out the door, his partner would have said, "You sure you want to wear that?"
Yeah.
But I wore a colorful belt, and it was like totally pushing the norm for me to be wearing a colorful girly belt in the picture. Um, but anyway, that's what the box does. It's a box that you open it, and it gives you a mindset of empowerment and reminder that it's okay to be feminine and in the construction industry, a growth component, and then something that actually is made for us. So that's the box. The second one is coming out in January. It actually goes on sale. It'll be on sale during the month of November. So by the time this goes out, it will be on sale. But yeah, so that's
Yeah.
it. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, because even the PPE, like just the number of times going on a job site and everybody just says, oh, the contractor has spares and you can use that. And a hard hat is one thing. But then you get the giant glasses that take over your entire face and you look like a 5-year-old. And then the only vests that are left are like the extra large.
Yep.
And people just didn't understand when I was flying on planes to go to a construction site. I'm like, nope, I'm bringing my own goggles, my own boots, and my own vest. The hard hat,
Yep.
sure, I will borrow the contractors. I don't need to throw that in my plane. But whenever my young male interns or young professionals need something, they just grab stuff and they're shocked that I have my whole set of items. I'm like, well, yeah, because I don't want to look like a giant, like, 5-year-old when you put them in clothes that are way too big and then you just
Yes.
feel out of place. And you're like, no, I want to be professional. I am here for a job. I want to do well. And there's also just so much out there too. I know I'm pregnant right now, so I've even learned that there's PPE for maternity, but I didn't
Yes.
look it up until I was there. Thankfully, I'm not on a job site whenever I will be giant, but it's me questioning, well, what are the women doing in the trades? And
Yes.
it's okay, I can't fit into the pants I usually wear whenever I do my own mortar tile work. I have my own job site clothing and I can't wear it right now. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, crap, what's out there? Are there options? And then learning that there are, that I'm like, okay, well, now I just want to scream it from the rooftop for
Yes.
anybody that is on a job site, regardless if they're trades or an architect having to go through, you still want to make sure that you're safe along the way. And
Yeah,
it's
because it's
there.
not just about appearances, right? It's not just about how it feels or how it looks on you. It's about safety. And those
Mm-hmm.
the safety vest, that's a real problem. Too many companies don't even order smalls, or they order very few smalls because they don't feel like that's going to fit most of their men and it's going to be a waste of money. But when you're wearing a big ass vest that's too big for you and it gets caught on some rebar or
Mm-hmm.
on a metal stud as you're walking through, that's a safety hazard. And I will tell you from the vest standpoint, I literally cried. So I, when I was an operations director, I decided, hey, I'm in charge here. I can order female fit vests for the women in our company. And so I researched and I got the approval and I ordered them. And when it came, I took it out of the box, I took it out of the packaging, I put it on, and I literally got tears in the back of my eyes because it was the first piece of PPE that ever felt like it was made for me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, everything about it, it actually fit. It had pockets where I was going to use pockets. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too big. It fit. And I thought, part of the tears were, one, yes, it's awesome that it fits, but part of it was like, why did it take so damn long?
Yeah.
And there's some great companies out there making gear just for women. Dovetail Workwear is one of them. Juno Jones Boots is one of them. Like, these are great companies that are really putting a lot of emphasis into making sure there is gear that fits for women. And that's what needs to be in these boxes. Women need to realize it, because just like you with the maternity wear for PPE, until you knew it existed, you were settling,
Yep.
right? And so when they get the box and they put on the glasses or whatever's in it, oh my God, so they make something like this. Okay, where do I get this? How do I get my company to order them?
Yeah. Or
That's
at
what
least
it's all about.
having coverage, even if I can see from a business standpoint why you wouldn't want to order a bunch of smalls and have it there and ready to go. But the second you know you're hiring somebody, why not confirm, hey, what are your needs? Or just write them a big check and say, okay, you need to make sure you have coverage for X, Y, and Z. Go get whatever fits you as long as it meets this criteria. So then on day one, they can feel comfortable, safe, and they can do their job with confidence.
Absolutely. Or let them be reimbursed,
Exactly.
but make sure that they have what they need, not just what was easy for you to get for them. So,
Yeah. And it's, hey, if you need to make an order to put the company name on it, sure, but have it ready to go. There's so many companies that can put the branding on for you. So,
yes, absolutely. And I want to circle back for just a quick second on the glasses and you talking about how you take all of that stuff with you. Safety glasses are so easy to get broken or to get scratched or whatever as you're carrying them. So, like in the 14 percenters box, not only did they get safety glasses, but they got the sleeve to put them in that has a little handle that can hang off of a backpack or something, because that's what we as women want. We want something that's going to protect what we have, and we're not trying to wear something that's scratched or something. We're just not going
yeah.
to settle. And so all of that is thought through when we put these boxes together.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to sign up for the box for the November
Yay!
month.
I hope you love it.
So, I'll keep you guys posted as I open my box, and I'll leave
Yes.
links below too for anybody that wants their
Yay.
box. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, because I know you're also a podcast host,
Yeah.
and I know I love podcasting. And so you have the Constructive Behaviors podcast.
Mhm.
So, what are you talking about over there, and what are you most excited about the podcast arm of what you're doing?
I think for me, I'm in a transitional phase with the podcast, which I'm excited about. So the first 50 episodes, I really focused on just meeting women in the industry and getting their story and learning from them. And I have learned so much. But I think for the next 50, I really want to focus on what is the specific topic that I know this person has a lot of experience about, and really focus on helping the audience learn something, whether it's a particular leadership skill, whether it's walking through a difficult conversation, whether it's having having the conversation about, I don't know, my mind is drawing a blank at the moment, but the next 50 are really going to focus on specific topics, less than people,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I know I take on a storytelling arm as my podcast, but there are other architecture podcasts that focus on either just women in construction or women in architecture, and I'm like, no, we're one big group. So like I take the approach of
Yes.
storytelling, but I got engineers, contractors, architects. I have the owner of Juno Jones. That will be an upcoming episode. Actually, it'll already be
Yay!
out by the time your episode comes out.
Awesome. Emily's great.
But just hearing everybody's stories and all the different perspectives. So even hearing your perspective as a superintendent and your experience getting drawings, how can that change my perspective as an architect to how I bring drawings to fruition? How can we both help an owner to do even better? So I'm still in my storytelling phase of my podcast,
And it's a fun phase.
but you learn so much. I have created so many fun relationships along the way, met so many great people, and I feel like my network when I have a question or need to reach out is just exponentially larger than where it
Yes.
was when I was just working.
Yes. Absolutely. My network in 2 years has, I mean, quadrupled maybe, and I didn't even realize this many women were actually in construction.
Mm-hmm.
It has been an incredible ride, and I have loved hearing their stories, and I will continue to hear their stories on my podcast. But just like you mentioned, a whole episode just focused on how could we work together better from general contractor to architect. That's a whole, somebody, lots of somebodies need to understand that conversation.
Exactly, because there's either the unconscious bias that we talked about, or the assumptions that contractors and architects always are against each other. In architecture school, they always say, oh, well, just don't go over to the dark side and go work for the contractor or even the owner. I'm like, why not? Why shouldn't architects be in the room of all these different situations to bring in a conversation or talk about design intent and what people are trying to do? Like, why is that the dark side? I don't get it.
Well, to be fair, those of us in the field, we call the office the dark side. So when I'm giving my keynotes, I will say that I eventually moved to the dark side. So we all have a different dark side.
Yeah, and just make it entertaining.
Yes.
But I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
Just starting your career. I would say ask for what you want. If you want to be in the field more, ask for it. And if you get told no, understand why so that you can figure out how to change that. If you want to be promoted quickly, ask for it. Let them tell you what it's going to take for you to get there. It's not just about asking, but it's about understanding their reason on what that timing may look like or why you can't get that project. Ask if you want, I really want to be on this particular project. Ask. Because the worst part is that you watch that project come and go and you never told anybody you even wanted to be a part of it. So my advice is ask for what you want. You won't always get it, but at least you'll learn what it takes to get it next time.
Yeah. I always say it's finding that no. And if you didn't find that no, like, if you ask for a certain amount of money and they say yes right away, I'm like, crap, I should ask for more. Like,
absolutely.
I didn't find the no first. I'd rather get to the no and bargain. Or if you really want to go to a job site, if you hear no because you have a project deadline that afternoon, okay, understand you're only getting a no because of the deadline, not as a no, you are forever banned from going to a job site.
Right. But when you ask it, then as if you were to ask me that and I'm like, you have a deadline, you can't go, at least puts it into my head that, oh, wait, they're wanting to go to job sites more. Okay. I'm going to think about that. So next time I see a great opportunity, I'm going to let them know, hey, you want to go out to this job site. So it's doing more than just that initial ask. It's putting that bug in their ear.
Exactly. So then they can think of you and you're not in the room.
That's right.
So
that's the goal. You want your name to come up when you're not in the room.
Exactly.
In a good way.
Yeah. Not when HR and the VP are in the same room with you. But if anybody's looking, I know you do a lot of keynote speeches and helping companies in their professional development and understanding unconscious bias. What's the best way to get a hold of you if they want to have you help them?
Yeah, I made it super easy. My website is constructionbarb.com. So you can find all of my stuff there, links to my socials, my keynotes, all of it. The podcast is even linked through there. So you can, and the box, the 14 percenters box, you can find everything at constructionbarb.com.
As a true commercial. But I'll make it even easier and I'll put the links down below and I'll separate it out to call out the box as well. So if you guys want to skip a step, but definitely check out some of the keynotes. I know I watched some of them and they are truly inspiring. And I was already sharing them with my network, just letting them know what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Barb, for taking the time to speak with me. It was fantastic.
Thanks. I enjoyed it very much.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.